Hi everyone, I'm Alistair Lewis and I am hosting today's workflow webinar where we'll be looking at Giraffe and Fenestra software, how they work together and basically create a seamless workflow. This is one of the priorities for this webinar series, is to look at how software can be used within your existing workflows and as part of your day-to-day activities. So I'm delighted we've got Rob and Sean here today. We're going to keep it super pacey, so we're going to kick off with Rob first to go through Giraffe for about 50 minutes, and then Sean will go through Finestra. We're going to hopefully show a nice linked up workflow between the two, and then we'll have questions and comments at the end. So feel free to add comments in the bottom of your screen, whichever platform you're on, YouTube or LinkedIn, and I will ask them at the end. But I am going to hand over to you, Rob, and let you introduce yourself and run through what you've been building.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you and great to be here. I am Rob. I was an architect for a long time. And now I started Giraffe we went full time in about 2020, just as COVID hit. And Giraffe is what I wanted Rhino to do. So I was a big Rhino Grasshopper person, but we couldn't share any of the scripts that we wrote. So we thought, all right, what if Rhino was less geometry heavy, less NURBS and advanced geometries, simpler but far more distributed, so that almost everyone can use it. And so we sell now to architects, to developers, to governments around the world. We've got staff in Australia. That's where we build the tool, and then we've also got a couple of staff in the US. But we've got clients all over the world. So Greystar, Trammell Crowe, New South Wales Government, Lend-Lease, as well as architects like Woods Bagot and Cox and a host of others. And I normally describe Giraffe as three things. It's a map, like Google Maps. It's like SketchUp, like a little modeling tool, simple modeling tool, and then it's a calculator. And putting those together allows a designer to do great work very, very quickly. So I'll just do a new project. That's the way I like to do it. So I'll start from scratch. Normally when I demo, I say, imagine the fastest person in your firm is going to get a call from a client and come up with a scheme as quickly as I am. So do that if you're an architect. All right, so in Giraffe, the first thing is the mapping, and we connect to data. So I have tens of thousands of data layers from around the world. And the reason we do this is because you cannot do design without understanding context. So it's always crazy to me when architects are like, yeah, we design in the city, we design in the context, and then they open up Revit or Rhino, and it's like this blank gray featureless universe. Whereas Giraffe, you are always on planet Earth. You're never not on planet Earth. So you can zoom, fly around anywhere. So let's say we're acquiring a site. Let's get this site over here. Then Giraffe lets you draw a project boundary. You can right-click and hit the database, the cadastral database, but the project boundary in Giraffe, all it does is it geolocates the project. So in Giraffe, everything is always geolocated, and that just means it's got a latitude and a longitude. And so we've got the zoning, and we've got the parcels, and we've got the satellite, and we've got the base map, we've got the 3D, we've got the point of interest labels. And if you have, if you're in the Greater London Authority, if you're in New York or wherever you are, Thailand, doesn't matter, there are always data layers which you can add to Giraffe, normally from government sources, but occasionally from private sources. So that's the mapping. And when I say right click, like I can right click on that and see that that's a soccer pitch. And if I right click on this parcel, you can see there's all that data on the left that's coming from the source of the data. So you can always dive into the metadata. So you can literally navigate petabytes of data just like this. And that's kind of GIS, use. And the next thing is Giraffe's this assumptions engine. So we've got this usage editor. We look at the city as like a system of systems. So we have what we call usages. They're just collections of assumptions that we use to describe urban elements, from parks to buildings to corridors to king hotel suites. But if I click on, or if I look for residential, there's an efficiency, which is a ratio of the entire building through to the, the net sellable and the GFA, like the net lettable. There's floor-to-floor heights, there's colors, there's dwelling mixes, and you can add literally whatever property you want. So you have a Revit family that you want to connect this to, you can create that and put it in. Sorry, I misclicked there, but you can literally add whichever properties you want to. All Giraffe is just a collection of assumptions. And if you look at the table, this is what they look like kind of as an Excel spreadsheet, or at least as a spreadsheet. And so I'll discard those. So we've got this data in there. And normally for a firm or a developer or a government, they standardize those across multiple projects. And then it's a drawing tool. So I'm going to hit the R key and I'm going to draw a rectangle. And now I'm going to grab the usage, the residential usage, and I'm going to apply it to that rectangle. And all those assumptions from the residential use, the floor to floor, which we've got at 3.2 meters, the color, all of that stuff comes across into Giraffe. So I just changed the color there to white. And if I hit save, you can see it's now white. And now Giraffe is just a drafting tool. It's not generative. It's not intelligent. It's literally just a very, very very, very fast polygon editing tool. But if you're a design architect, this is enough to wow a client. And you can see here, like our parcel, I better edit that project boundary. You can see there's Rhino heritage. I hit the space key there to bring up the command bar. So this is the entrance to our site. And a lot of what Giraffe is used to do is tell design stories rather than design mass. I probably shouldn't have started off by designing those buildings so quickly. So let me do this, make a park, a green heart, and then we'll start making some mass. So I've got like a little scheme here, right? And what Giraffe's doing is taking those assumptions, these geometries that are geolocated, that are in context, that are in the zoning, and it's just converting them into numbers. So we've got the number of dwellings, we've got the skin, we've the facade area, the maximum height. And what Giraffe allows us to do as well is set our own calculations. So I'll open up the metric template just because, and I'll show you something like this, like the tree count, right? So here's the tree count, and here's canopy cover. And if you look at what canopy cover is, it's just looking for the canopy radius property where the usage is a tree, and it's multiplying that by the constant pi, 3.14, and then, canopy squared. So pi times canopy radius equals canopy cover, right? So just an equation, just a formula. And if you said, well, not strictly true, 80% of the canopy is not canopy cover, like we should apply a factor down, you just chuck that in. It's just like an Excel format, and then your canopy cover drops. But we're getting net building areas in very similar ways, and also total population. What's total population? Number of dwellings times number of people. So it's just kind of numbers. It's like a counting machine. But the nice thing about it is it's tied to this scheme. So I don't know what this is. So, a bit SketchUp-y, 2.5D. You can't slope the walls or anything like that. There's no Zaha Hadid. Great mapping and great analytics. And then on top of that, we do two things. The first is we add APIs and SDKs, so you can create an app. Like Finestra could build a plugin here. I almost put it in, but from an iframe, you can't log into Finestra for good security reasons. But if they let me, I could. And these are hundreds and hundreds of apps. Like this New South Wales government development application, that's an app that they built using an iframe. You pop it in, and that's to track their own internal. Christmas Grand Prix, we released that last Christmas. That lets you drive a truck around this model. But whatever your particular use case is, you can add that app in. So it could be public engagement, it could be a facade designer, it could be wind, whatever that is. But if you don't need to build an app and you're a computational designer, the other thing we do is computational design. So I'll do a quick one. We call it Flow. It's like a really silly name, but it is what it is. This is React Flow. We're using the React Flow library. So I've got the feature there. And so what I can do is I can do a stroke dash. So it's kind of like, it's very, very similar to Grasshopper. I'll do a stroke dash transform. Then I'm going to take the dashes and I'm going to offset them. I will offset them using the dendro and offset the polygon. So I'll take the strokes, offset them, put that transform in, and I'll write those features out as well. Okay, there they are. Now I don't want to offset them both sides. I'll offset them to the left, and I'll offset them 0.1, and that's going to go the wrong way. I was working a negative. No, I was good. And now I'll change the stroke dash. So I'll say like 2 meters and then a 0.1. Right, and you can see now I've got this little flow, and all this flow is doing is adding kind of like a facade grid, right? Which is relatively useless. It's very easy from this to calculate your mullion lengths, like do a quick takeoffs on mullion lengths if you're doing that. But it's also nice in terms of just giving a sense of scale and proportion to this building. And the nice thing about giraffes, you can always slide stuff underneath. So I'll put some retail at the bottom. And now I'll just round the corners of this retail and get something cool. Something like that. And then I'll do something like that. All right, so now I've got like this mixed use building over here. There's way too many trees. And if I do this and go here, you can see how heavily parameter driven Giraffe is. Like it's all flows. And if I open this, where are these trees coming from? It's another flow. It's another little, algorithm that just randomly fills this polygon with trees and rounds the corners. But I got something nice. And the last we do a lot of investment into, like, I would call them heavy algorithms, like this one over here, which is an apartment algorithm. So if I look at what it looks like in flow, again, it's the same thing. It's just batteries connected. This one's the apartment one. It has it's a very sort of heavyweight beast, but it allows you to do apartment planning very quickly, and you can change your depths and your end caps. And so you can get a nice mix. So I'm going to do an Australian style point tower. So there's the core over there. And I'll copy that on top, and I will do something like, maybe, there we go. That's what I wanted. Something like this, and just align those structural walls. So now I've got, 2 beds at the bottom, 1 bed at the top. Those of you who know property development knows that's the other way around. So you put the bigger units up high where they're more valuable. And so now I've got an apartment building laid out. I've got an idea of the mix and the yield across the floor plates, and I'm even changing the floor plate up, and I'm aligning my structural blades. So I know that this is a very rational thing. And now what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and download this, and I'll send it to Sean. So you can export into STL, OBJ, CSV, GeoJSON. We've got a whole bunch of Rhino like scripts to import this stuff straight into Rhino. And of course, if you've got any any NAS using the old Dynamo or Grasshopper, you can write it straight into Revit. It's just polygons. Like Giraffe is just, when you look at the actual data, it's just coordinates, like geometries with, this is a polygon, X, Y, X, Y. So you can just write them across as polylines, very, very simply. Okay. Do I have a few more minutes? Do I have another minute?
Yeah, keep going. Yeah, you've got a couple more. Keep going.
Yeah, great. Okay. So I'll show you a few fancy things. So here is another building. And this is a big flow. So you can see here's a flow that I've spent a bunch of time on. It's got a bit more, involvement. I won't build this one out in front of you. What this leverages is the fact that Giraffe can import GLB. So if I upload a 3D model, here's the standard Giraffe. But if you change that, you can select any kind of GLB. And GLB, call it like the JPEG of 3D, So there's the Burge. And what I've done here is I modeled some modules, some facade modules as GLB. I did it in Vectri. You could do it in Rhino. You could do it in Revit. They could be Revit files. And then I've used Flow to apply them to this building. And then I've just done like a classic sort of random reduce algorithm. So I've actually got 3 module types. I've got the window, and I've got the solid module, and then I've got that like little arched door one, that one. And I can mix them in varying proportions just using these parameters that I've done, right? So this truly is computational design. And then I can just play around with this thing and sort of design buildings in this sort of really, really fun way. So Giraffe, when it's singing, just lets you mix, like a very rapid, fluid, but very hyper detail modeling paradigm, and communicate with your client in a way that I guarantee they have never been communicated with before. And at all times, you don't even think about it, but the data, like your areas, your FSRs, your FARs, your heights, your floor to skin, all of that stuff is always there. It's just there all the time. All right, so why don't we I'll try and export. Oh, here's all the GLBs. When I import them, those are the raw modules, and then I'm sort of chucking them around. So
I'll hand over to Sean, and he will take us away with Finestra.
Yeah, Rob, if it's possible, could you shoot me over as a GLB, not a GLTF?
Yeah, I'll do it as a GLB. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Hi, so I'm Sean. I'm the founder of Finestra. I also used to be kind of an architectural designer. Spent a few years actually working in Australia. I used to work in Melbourne.
Nice.
So that's a nice connection. But then I guess gave it up to become a founder and also a kind of technical XR designer, developer type person. And for the last 6 to 8 months, we've been building Finestra, which is a generative AI platform for architects, essentially, trying to take them from really simple, sketches or models like we just created in Giraffe, and then produce essentially high quality visualizations in as quickly as we can possibly create them. What we've been trying to do recently is just to kind of go across the entire stack of kind of generative AI. So making all, image generation as easy as possible, video, enhancing things, like the whole 9 yards essentially. So I'm gonna jump into, I'll present my screen. Let's see. Perfect. So if you're a brand new user, you'll be greeted with a screen like this. I'm just going to create a brand new project. Let's just call it stream. And basically, we just set up really simple. What do you want to add? Image, 3D model. I like to use images for sketches and things like that, or you can grab images from, for instance, SketchUp or Rhino or wherever you're 3D modeling, wherever you're kind of coming up with ideas essentially. But for this, because we have a 3D model, we'll import one. All right. Okay. Looks like I didn't get my textures in with me. All good though.
No,
so
sorry,
because it is,
our emissions are at 100%. It still works though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know why it doesn't have text. Yeah. It's all good. Yeah. So because it's just coming white, we will get less. It'll be more of the kind of silhouette, I guess, that we'll be using here. But essentially, you're really quickly getting a 3D model, spin it around, right, as you would in any other 3D software. On the left-hand side is kind of all of your essential toolbars. So up the top is essentially where you'll have your images and videos all stored. So that's everything that will be generated. Below are views. So you can think of views as just kind of camera views, essentially, especially if you're using 3D. So if I start creating a few views, grab another one. All right. So then quickly, we can grab a couple of different views essentially from the same project. Because we have just got the kind of silhouette, I think I'll do a little bit more of the kind of prompting here to try and bring it to life. So on the right-hand side, we've introduced essentially presets. So these try to fill in quite a lot of the gaps for your typical user and your typical kind of workflow. The one I use quite often is a sketch to render. It doesn't have to be a sketch. It can be something really simple like this. So, simple kind of white boxes that we've brought in, massing studies. And you can very quickly start setting up, your time of day, the environment, the visual type, for instance, just interior or exterior, and then the kind of base image details. So this provides a little bit more information to the AI. Like if you are using line work, it will give it a bit more detail. If it's kind of textured 3D, it'll try its best to use the input and understand the colors essentially, and the same for the 2D. But for this, because it is relatively simple, I'll just go with the line work. And we also have reference images. So this is where it makes it really simple, right? So I don't know if I have any. Let me see if I have something. Maybe this probably works. So this is going to be the reference image. Essentially what will happen is it will use this image to try to produce, an amalgamation essentially of this input and the reference image alongside all of the prompting. we've set it to the environment to kind of warm sun, but I might just change it to just like a clear sky. And then I think we can just hit render. And what we'll see happening, hopefully, if everything goes to plan, we'll eventually start getting kind of latent steps, which are the incremental steps as the AI is kind of generating these images. What you can see as well is on the right-hand side, within the preset workflows, they all have advanced tabs. So you might want to, jump into illustration or go to the texture 3D, and you'll see that all the settings are basically very different. So if I jump back into sketch to render, hit advanced, we then have a bit more detail in terms of, what's there, right? So we've reset the reference image and we have some values as well. So this controls for the base image detail, how strong we want it to adhere to the image input. So it doesn't really fully understand what it was getting as an input here. But what we can do is use.
It looks pretty good.
Yeah, not too bad, but we can prompt it, right? So like we can say it's a tower in, let's say, Melbourne, right? Oh, can't spell. Quickly. Tower in Melbourne. Let's say modern facade or modern glass facade, right? Just keep it simple. Glass facade. And we have these values, right? So if I pull down the reference image value, it'll take very little amount of influence from this. But if I bump it up to, let's say, 0.7, the values are between 0 and 1. The closer to 1, the more it'll try to listen to that image. But in this case, because we've kind of went for that 0.7, it's closer to the image, but also it'll use, it should use some of our prompt to give it some of the detail. Obviously, the more context you provide it, the better. Apologies. Got that coffee, I think, stuck in the back of my throat. But then you, apologies there. And then you can see very quickly we start to produce some sketch images. Essentially, it will hallucinate in certain parts. It also hallucinates, the landscaping and the background and so on. We'd also give it some context to tell it like there's some trees in the center, or let's say trees between the buildings. Yeah, and hopefully this should give it a little bit more context for the image as well. And then hopefully, the more detail that you add to your project, the more detail you add to the image that you see in the canvas here, the better the outcome will be. So obviously this is relatively simple. If you continue working with, Giraffe or Rhino or wherever it is you're going to create your 3D model, you can add a little bit more detail to that as well. Yeah, and you've got a little bit of hallucination happening here, but base understanding of like something simple, right? I'll just show you something else just so I can quickly get you a better understanding of what it can do. If I go in and grab myself like a little sketch image or something. So if you have something really simple, you won't get as much detail in the image. But for instance, if I take this sketch here and add, another reference, right? And we say it's like timber architecture in, let's say it's in Scotland for this one. And I'm going to change, let's say it's, keep it morning. I'm going to make it foggy. Leave the values as they are. So what you'll see here is the more information that we've provided, the better results we're going to get. Because essentially what Finestra is trying to do in all of these situations is take the information that you provided. So if you have additional context, if you did export the facade with all the details of your mullions and so on, then it will, try its best to adhere to that, but also use that as the kind of base underlying geometry for what it's trying to produce. So you'll get a much more coherent image the more detailed the image you put in, essentially. All right, so here we go. And what I like to do is when I'm doing anything with Finestra in general is I'm using this first kind of create tab up the top here as the initial concepting, right? So when you're coming up with ideas, you're trying to change things, you're playing around essentially. And this will produce standard images between 1024 by 1024. I like to enhance the images as well, so like pretty good, I would say, not too bad. Maybe I'll go with something like this and we can enhance it. And then if I click the enhance button, it should bring out sharper details, way more articulation in the facade and the timber, and it should make it feel a bit more realistic as well. So I like to do it in that way. It means that when you're quickly coming up with ideas, you can, and then you'll see the comparison here. So before, still fine, I would say, but obviously once we enhance it, it will have a lot greater detail. One of the things we added recently is the ability to edit. So we do have the option to come in and, lasso an area if you'd like. But I think in most cases, I really like using this preset called conversational edit. Recently, Flux context was released and it's been really great. So what we can do is really quickly, let's change the facade to concrete. So let's say precast concrete facade. And then in this case, what should happen is the underlying kind of image is sent through, it understands what the context of that image is, and it should replace the timber facade with concrete facade. Because we're not directly lassoing a certain area, mileage may vary, but it seems like we've got a pretty good result so far. And you can continue with that. Like you can make it snow. So make it snow. I know there's not much snow in Melbourne. Or well, in the winter it's kind of cold, right? I'm not sure actually where you are in Australia, but you can quickly make it snow. You can change the day to night as well. You can turn the lights off in the environment. Oh, it's already made it kind of nighttime as well. So this is taken in the original timber. And you'll see that I've been speaking about this quite a bit online. That's like, if you're willing to accept it, in some cases, the camera angle will move very slightly. You will get so much better results just for yourself and also from the models. So it uses all the same geometry. The building looks the same as what it did, but you'll see that the camera angle does shift very slightly. Not all the time, but I found that when you try to force the AI to kind of adhere to the camera angle and you tell it, do not move, do not do this, it often doesn't listen. So yeah, and that's kind of like the easy steps of setting things up in Finestra. What I would do now is enhance it really quickly so it's sharp, and then maybe the last thing we can do before we kind of end off is we can make a really quick video as well. So the kind of core idea of what we were trying to build is making it as accessible as possible for architects and interior designers or any designers in general, just to make AI easy. There's obviously lots of solutions out there that are really complex, that can provide really powerful solutions, but we're trying to make it simple, right? Make it accessible so that you don't have just one single person in your team that knows how to use a certain AI tool or knows how to use Python or knows how to, do anything like that. And, if they leave, then you kind of lose the core intelligence or the core kind of software skills, essentially. Trying to make it really simple. So again, same for videos. We can set up key camera angles, camera presets. If I just set it to zoom out and just say like snowing evening, it's super simple, right? I'll just click it and hopefully we get something in a few seconds. With video generations, we do allow you to kind of queue them up. So because they usually take maybe a minute and a half or something like that to produce, they will queue up in the background and you'll see them up here essentially sitting. So hopefully that eventually turns into a nice video outcome. And that's kind of like really high level, but yeah, if anybody wants to know more, wants to kind of learn the entire details, I just realized I sent the wrong image, my bad. But same, right? We have an image that's now turned into a rendering, essentially. Yeah, and if anybody wants to know more, just reach out. Happy to show the tips and tricks in more detail.
That's really good. That's amazing. So is that's taking advantage of the the kind of video aspect? Basically, you can create a 5-second video. Is that right?
Yeah, at the moment, 5-second video. We can up it to 10. We have a few different models that we're using. This one's currently using Runway, which we've found to be one of the best and also the most cost effective for users as well. Like the cost of something like VO3 or Kling, or you're talking close to $10 a render for VO3, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah. So for us, for my benefit and for others as well, in terms within this, you've got these different models that you're using, different AI models, like you're saying, Runway and Connect and things. Can you explain that a bit more, how that all kind of works? Because I think from my side, I see loads of these things on LinkedIn, and it is quite confusing.
Yeah, so I think at least what we're trying to do is break it into really simple steps, right? So we imagine you would create things, you would edit images, you'd probably like to enhance them or upscale them or kind of, make them big enough so you can print it or like bring it to review, something like that. And quite often, I personally like, and what we've seen is people like to bring, those images to life with a little bit of motion. And it doesn't have to be too crazy, right? It can be a little zoom out, a little zoom in, a little pan. And we're trying to bring all of those models into those workflows. And some of them are better than others at certain things. So our kind of base model is our own workflow. That's our kind of sketch to image, which has the best adherence. So it will stick to the geometry, the underlying geometry, the best. If you're using something like the context models, it essentially understands the image a lot better, but it does like to hallucinate or deviate. It doesn't have as many guardrails, essentially. But what's quite good about it is you can talk to it like a human being. So you can tell it like, let's make it snow, or add a person in the front, things like that, which with most standard AI models, you can't, right? You need to describe what the image should look like when it's done, rather than what you want the action to be, to have that kind of next step, essentially.
Yeah. Okay. And you're combining those different models into it, and essentially as more get released, you can essentially test those and bring them in and integrate it into your software, and that allows users loads of flexibility.
Yeah, exactly. So like the idea is to make it simple, right? So setting up these presets to make it as simple and easy to use, access to all of the best models that are available. And on top of that, added prompt adherence, prompt editing from our side, some things that kind of make it just like that uplift from going from have no idea how to make an image to make an animation, that type of thing, to get into that as quickly as possible. That's kind of the goal, right? Regardless of the model, make that UX really simple and easy to use.
Yeah, and I think you've both demonstrated that with both your software. And Rob, I was going to ask you that, because like we talked about with your software, like so I used to do feasibility studies for schools, and that tool which has been so helpful because I mean, this was 10 years ago, but we'd have a plan, and then we'd do polygons, which are like a classroom is this side and a sports hall is this side. And you'd move them around and you'd do that feasibility stage, and then you'd obviously have to put together an Excel spreadsheet with all the areas on there. The modules would be different colors depending on whether they were teaching rooms or ancillary rooms and things, but it was super manual and really like we obviously had a process for it, but the actual granular detail you've got in your software would have been hugely helpful. How are you seeing your kind of clients using that? I mean, obviously you've got one doing schools, but what else are they kind of using it for?
So basically, like unofficial title of Giraffe is like thinking systems for system thinkers. So if you can break down your process and say, this is what we're doing. We are looking at this kind of program and we are putting it together in these kinds of ways, and we're looking for these kinds of outcomes or outputs, whether it's residential, data center, industrial, town planning, urban planning, zoning, train stations. It actually doesn't matter. Anything works. as long as you have that kind of system thinking approach. If you don't, Giraffe is still kind of useful because it's fun and it's got a pretty good UI and blah blah. But it really goes crazy when you go, okay, actually, I'm going to do this. And so that example, that Schools Infrastructure New South Wales example, the reason that one looks so good is because they've done all that systems thinking. So I was able to download those. I didn't download the Revit components. I actually had to rebuild them, but it took like half an hour. But they've got the Revit components and they've done this entire kind of kit of parts philosophy. And then the digital is perfect for it. So we're always looking for clients that have done that thinking and they're going, actually, we've got an ordered way of working and now we're seeking to digitize. Because very frequently people go, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. They don't say I don't know what I'm doing. They say, give me AI, just give it to me. And then you go, okay, well, what's your process? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to achieve? And it's like, oh, great question, right? And so, so like if you don't have that kind of rigor before the technology, I feel the technology is not that yet. So we look for, just not a direct answer. So we see our clients do all sorts of things, but it's when they're thinking in that rigorous way that the technology sings. And just to be clear, that so those kit of parts that I used from SINSW, though that's not as a client, I literally just downloaded those as a citizen. You can go to their website and download them. And I just made that up. So that's a pure demo.
Yeah, interesting. But it demonstrates the value of it in a really simple way.
And I use it as to show that it's a real client really doing that thinking. Because we'll have clients that are doing it that I can't show. Do you know what I mean? Because they're doing it on their own, in their own way. Whereas this is a very public set of those components and that design thinking. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you both, if you would, to the question about why you started doing this. What made you both decide to make software and essentially move away from being, within the architecture profession as a thing and move into that software side?
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, go first.
I can go first.
Yeah, go first, Sean.
So for me, I've always been on the cusp of leaving architecture, unfortunately. I think even since like the third year of uni, like just finishing off my bachelor, I was like, cool. What can I do next? And I was kind of like fascinated by the whole like parametricism space at that time. It sounded like cool stuff going on, cool technology people were starting to bring into architecture in general. And always being like a spatial thinker and someone that is trying to use spatial thinking regardless of what they're doing. For me, I left architecture, I think, not long after graduating, if I'm perfectly honest, and then ended up teaching for a bit, which I thought was like super exciting. But the things that I found the most exciting to teach were new tools and techniques. And it just made sense for me to like naturally, I kind of deviated a little bit and, went off and started building software for other people and building apps and things like that. And then came back. But at the same time, it was always spatial software. So it was always things that included 3D. I worked on a lot of XR stuff. So I was kind of fascinated by the idea of like, why don't we build buildings and headsets, and why doesn't our kind of built environment change by the way that we kind of the way we walk around it? The world becomes Fortnite skins and all these types of crazy things. But then building Finestra just made sense to me. It looked like an area where architects, are constantly paying lots of money essentially for visualizations that are used on a relatively frequent basis. And it makes more sense to try to help them communicate their ideas, or at least that was my thinking, is like we can help them communicate their ideas to clients, planning, internal team discussions, hopefully a lot quicker than you can do by spending, $1,000, $10,000 essentially on a single image. And that was kind of the goal.
That's good.
Rob, what about you?
I was kind of the opposite. So I was an architect for a very long time. I became an associate at Cox, and I was a competition, and I did computational design, but not, a lot of people do it as a sort of an end in itself. I did it, but I was always just, client facing, design focused. And I kind of reached this juncture where I would either be like, go director track and become a design, architect, or Zoom. And what I'd been doing was a lot of more urban planning and like systems thinking and thinking, okay, there's like the cities are getting worse and the construction industry is in crisis and the build quality is depressing. It's shitty that people prefer to live in a 200-year-old building than a recent building. Like, it's like, oh, Georgian terrace, great. And then like something that was built like, nah, whatever. You know what I mean? So why is that? What sort of crisis has precipitated that? And it's so systemic, and there's no one to blame. It's just like this complex, this industrial processes. And so we realized, or I thought, like, look, I can have a huge impact on the way that cities are put together if we can sort out the thinking and make explicit, kind of like what I was saying before. If people can design the way they design and actually embrace the computer and use it in the way it needs to be used, there's just so much benefit to be had. And it's not inhuman. It's not like, hey, hand over design like to AI and that it's like you're doing, Sean, like use AI when it makes sense and don't use AI when it doesn't make sense. And sort of that centaur argument. So for us, it's about, or for me, it was about impact and scale. And really, like, how do you actually make better cities and think about them very deeply? And it's integrating finance and politics and design and so many disciplines need to be condensed and understood kind of simultaneously for a good outcome. And I just don't see a way without technology kind of stitching it together. And so that became the challenge that we sort of worked on.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And we can see that, all of those things, like you say, recent buildings they're not what we want to see, essentially, suburban designs and,
well, that's right. And there's like bright spot, like there's, it's not all bad, but just systematically, everyone knows we could do better. So it's like, how can we? Yeah.
So on the adoption of tools like this, so a lot of architects' workflows currently are essentially they use SketchUp and then they go into CAD, or they may go into a BIM authoring software, maybe ArchiCAD, Revit, or Vectorworks-ish. But my experience has been, SketchUp, Vectorworks, and like I've said, it's so manual, and essentially you need to do the counting. And you're talking about using the computer to do that stuff essentially. And I've done this big report on looking at generative design tools, and I think there is the adoption of those tools doesn't seem to be as fast as I would have assumed they would be. And we've talked previously about how you look at real estate and developer clients who are like, they see your software and go, yep, I want to do this, because they can see the value very, very quickly. Whereas architects is more difficult to convince in some ways. But I mean, what are you seeing? Is your tool kind of replacing SketchUp when architects are using it, or is it just augmenting workflows with Revit and other software?
It's hard to know. It's sort of the majority of our sales are now to developers and government. I feel like architects are snowed under or something. Any architects in the audience, please tell me, because Giraffe is $45 a month. It costs 20 minutes of billable time. I know, I literally know. I used to do this. I know how much time it saves. If I quit Giraffe, I will start an architecture firm, and I will use Giraffe, right? And I will slay. I know I will. I just don't even. I know it impresses clients. We sell to the clients. But this adoption of the architects, I'm not sure why. And is it mindshare from Autodesk? Is it? I saw a comment. Someone gave a really nice comment to us in LinkedIn the other day, which was like, Giraffe is so good, I had to unlearn everything I learned. So it could be like it's just like this paradigm about the way things are. And Giraffe is, I get it, it's paradigmatically a little bit different. But I'm not sure. So we've tried to play with the price to make it adoptable. But when people do use it, the architects that do use it, generally it's senior architects, client facing, and the magicians. Do you know what I mean? They can go to a client and they sit down, and in 30 minutes they bash out 20 concepts. The client's mind is blown, and there's a relationship of trust that's built there over the software. But not it's like the software is dumb. The software is not winning the work. It's still the architect's creativity. The software is just doing the manual, like the boring stuff. And that's where we see it. That's where I see it really take off. But widespread, I would have thought as well, adoption would be broader. But it's funny that of our of our target markets, they are definitely the slowest, even though they know the most about technology. So I'll actually tell you, final thing, the user in Giraffe who always just buys it immediately is an architect who's moved into development or government. So they're comfortable with CAD and the concepts, and then they've got this imperative to move quickly and be decisive and be creative, and then they just go. So that's what we look for. That's our ideal buyer.
I wonder if that's because there's a disconnect between the architect speed and the eventual cost that it costs the office, essentially, from your typical architect. Like, I would imagine that the director or something like that someone that's a decision maker would probably love it, right? Because it would make their team faster.
Yes.
But your average architect that's, maybe lower down the ranks doesn't really have much interest in that case of being faster.
There's probably something to that. There's probably, and I think the reason the directors still hang on to the fat black texter, like the pen, is because the pen actually moves as quick as conversation. So they can take the pen to a meeting. They can't take Revit and boot it up and then that's just not going to happen. But you can take Giraffe. You know what I mean? You can. Yeah.
Theoretically on an iPad or something as well, right?
Yeah. That's, people ask, and we haven't made it work yet, but we want to.
Yeah. Is that, and Sean, in terms of the people using your software, I suppose, what is the audience? Who are the type of people who are coming to you to use the software?
Originally, we were purely targeting architects. The original kind of goal was to target small to medium-sized businesses, because we assumed that they would have the most kind of to gain, right? You don't have to spend, or in most cases, you wouldn't have to spend the thousands or hundreds of dollars, depending on where you're getting those visuals from. It would make them a bit more competitive. But we've actually found that a little bit medium to large businesses are picking up licenses. I feel like they have less hesitancy to, try it out, essentially. On the other side as well, there's quite a lot of students that are using it within their own processes.
Oh, interesting.
Which is quite nice, because we're also really affordable, right? Like, the cheapest plan you can get is like $10. If you buy it for a year, it's $8 a month, right? It's the equivalent of 2 coffees. Really, really cheap. For small to medium-sized businesses, the $30 a month makes the most sense. It gives you kind of commercial licensing and all of that. And we've mostly seen those types of people pick it up. We've had, what I think is quite interesting now, is larger businesses have a lot of say in where they want their data to be used and the types of data that they have. So we're starting to talk with people for kind of enterprise solutions where building custom tools for them makes the most sense. But again, at the same time, making it really simple for them to roll out to lots of the team. You don't need this single developer that knows how to, download the Stable Diffusion libraries or something like that from Python and build a tool for the internal team and then maintain that tool. So those are the kind of range of people we're seeing use it.
Yeah, the approach with students is quite interesting, because my assumption is students are going to be using and testing a lot of these tools, particularly when they are low cost, because it makes sense to them. They're also a lot more digitally savvy than we used to be, because they're like, software as a service. Yes, I'm used to it. I pay for Netflix, Spotify. This is just how they pay, so that they turn them on and off. So they're like, use your software maybe for a month, and then the next month they're doing a different stage of design or whatever, and then you can come back and turn it back on. And that fluidity, I think, will be much more prevalent in a what I'm going to say is a younger generation. So I think folks, the other thing about students is that they then come into practices and then start saying, well, I was using this, and the practice that maybe they're originally like, we use Lumion, but it's like, that's a really expensive piece of software, whereas and also it doesn't have the AI and all the rest of it things in there. So there's large incumbents. We've all talked about Revit and Autodesk, and there's some large incumbents who are in a lot of these practices where they could be nicely disrupted, essentially, to leverage the better tools out there to help us get rid of them. And Rob, I was interested because I was watching your thing, just thinking, essentially yours would kill SketchUp completely, which would be amazing. Just get rid of that.
Well, so SketchUp is great. It's like what we don't do is the winged mesh like that winged mesh editing.
Okay.
Like fully, you can just pull it. Whereas we're just straight up and down. So Giraffe is not everything, but for a lot, like you go into a lot of firms and they're using SketchUp like Giraffe, as in they're just doing straight up and but they copy paste and then they're hacking the material library to pull the areas out. And you're like, what the hell is going on here? There's a cool plugin which is like a Giraffe for SketchUp. But yeah, exactly. And you're like, that's where the question is like, what are you actually trying to do here? Is it critical to you to be able to create arbitrary mesh geometries? If so, SketchUp is correct. But are you just using, 2D?
Yeah.
Then Giraffe is definitely, same with Revit. Like people will always show me in large firms, there's always someone who's built a Giraffe in Rhino. So like there's G blocks at Gansler and like wherever you go. And I had Giraffe in Rhino when I was at Cox, right? And it does exactly what you need. And then there's always like often in Revit you can create these magnificent machines where you can do some massing and then like bring in libraries but I think the smaller the one big bubble like Revit that does everything, maybe with Rhino and Adobe, is going to dissolve, and there'll be a bit of Arcol, a bit of Giraffe, a bit of SketchUp, a bit of and this price point, say $30 to $50 a month. Like if you buy 10 of them and you've got one Revit, do you know what I mean? So you can really choose. Like you just like, I'll just get all of them and see which one I prefer, and it's still cheaper. But you'll need probably at least a couple of Revit licenses for like the stadium that you do, or the the hospital BIM requirements type stuff.
Yeah. But you can move that much later in the process to stage 4. You go from stage 4
100%.
onwards.
Yeah.
Go there.
Well, because like if I Giraffe and Finestra can create like a mood board and a presentation that is like killer, right? And then I think it'll be the quickest way to create a Revit model will be via Giraffe or via Snaptrude. Like I put a video up today where I can like export like all the polylines that I've got and instantiate them up in a Revit.
Wow.
It'll be easier. Like rather than drafting it in Revit, you'll draft it in another tool. Because I think this design intent modeling and this building information modeling, the one tool can't do it all. So you've got to split it up, and that's kind of what's happening.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and that's where the key to this is. You say to architects, there are better tools to design with. You can design. Design is important. We all love design, and you can use the right tool for those designs, whatever it is. And then once you've got your design work done, then get into Revit and produce production information. But
design is the thing. There's that famous tweet which was like, we wanted AI to like do the laundry and the cleaning, and then I could like make movies and paint pictures, and it's like instead AI is painting pictures and I'm doing laundry. It's like all backwards. it's like you know what I mean. So I think like there's this key thing of like identifying what you want the machine to do, and then what you don't want it to do. This is why I love this kind of AI use case where you give it a picture and you say, hey, this is my picture. Now make it, that's fill it in, but don't give me a building. You know what I mean? And then you sort of wait and see what building you get.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I think it's amazing. I think that it's so good. It's so good what you've done, both of you. So I really appreciate you showing that to us today. I was just going to share just a very quick thing, which is I'm going to launch out tomorrow actually for people. So if people want to find out about generative design tools and BIM 2.0 tools like Arcol, Snaptrude, Quonic, things like that, I've created a cheat sheet which it's basically got 40 different software on there, and it has everything that you'd need to know as an overview on there. So I've created this cheat sheet, and I'll put the website for this in the chat for people to grab if they want to, or I think I did it. Let me just do this. Yeah, it's just here. So you can go there and you can get access to that straight away. You can see all of those different tools, see what they can do, what they can export to, what sector they're focused on, things like that. So I'm hoping it's a really useful resource for people to have a look at. And obviously, as well as that, I have put together a generative design report. So if you want a deeper dive into this, there's 2 reports. One is a taster document, which is a kind of an intro to all those different tools, and then there's a much deeper dive where I've reviewed about 20 of those different tools in depth, and that's on the website as well, which you can find at ad.io/GD. so that's my sort of quick plug for stuff I've been doing over the last few months. But it's essentially, these are the future, these software, and this is the direction of travel, which is really exciting. And we're going to see all of these things emerge over the next 12 months, next 2 years, next 5 years or so, where it seems to be a critical point in time. And Rob, you were at the Architect Network session. You presented online at that a couple of months ago, and it did feel like this is the time that those tools are emerging and is going to change the way that we do things, which is great because I did a post a few weeks ago just saying that all of the tools that we're using at the moment they're all over 25 years old. The most recent, I think, SketchUp came out in 2000. Every other major tool we used was developed in the 1900s. That's how old they are. No, when you say it like that, you're like, oh my God.
Yeah, it's like a biplane.
So there's this massive, exciting opportunity for architects to really engage with these new software, no matter what they're doing. And I think what you've said, Rob, is really crucial. Systematize, work out what you want to do, and then work out the different tools that go in there. And then, Sean, with Finestra, I mean, it's amazing. You've got the different models in there. It's super easy to get it in there, create these renderings, and control that as a designer. And that's really really important. So I'm going to finish up there. Thank you very much again, both of you. Really appreciate that. If anyone is watching, please reach out to Rob and to Sean on LinkedIn. Most likely, probably one of the best places, but you can obviously go to their website, which I've shared previous to this. So please reach out to them and give the software a try and work it out, put it into your workflows. So thank you very much. I'll leave it there, and we'll be running another webinar in a couple of weeks, and I will announce that soon. Okay, thanks very much. See you soon.
Thank you.
Awesome.